flies too close to the sun and falls. That's the story everyone tells about Icarus. But the oldest Greek sources never mention the fall. In the 8th century BCE, Homer records only one detail about Daedalus, a masterwork constructed inside a palace at Knossos, a real place buried for millennia. Over 20,000 square meters, more than 1,000 rooms. The untold myth of Icarus and Daedalus does not begin in the sky. It begins inside a labyrinth that no one, not even its creator, was ever meant to leave. Daedalus enters Greek myth not as a fallen father, but as a figure of skill whose reputation shadows the palaces of ancient Crete. His earliest traces are scattered, lines half lost from Hesiod's catalogue of women, where his name stands among legendary makers already famous by the 8th century BCE. No full story survives from these beginnings, only the hint that Daedalus belonged to a world where mastery itself was mythic. Homer, writing in the same era, places him at the heart of Knossos. In the Iliad, Daedalus is credited with crafting a dancing floor for Ariadne, a ceremonial space within the palace, shaped by hands capable of more than mere utility. The poet lingers not on monsters or escape, but on the act of making, a craftsman whose work is worthy of song. Knossos, with its 1,000 rooms and winding corridors, becomes more than a backdrop. It is a stage for creation, a puzzle built from wood and stone, where the line between art and architecture blurs. Before warnings, before wings, the myth asks why a maker, rather than a king or a hero, stands at the center of Crete's greatest enigma. Centuries after Daedalus first haunted the halls of Crete, the myth hardened into a warning. In the hands of Apollodorus, the story becomes a clean chain of invention, caution, and disaster. Daedalus fashions wings from feathers and wax, instructs Icarus to keep to the middle path, and watches as that warning fails. The act of flight, once a marvel, now carries the threat of ruin. Hyginus adds a new layer. Daedalus's skill is not only learned, but granted by a goddess. Craft becomes a gift, and with it, a debt to the divine order. The myth no longer belongs only to the realm of clever hands. It is shaped by forces beyond human reach. Of its metamorphoses gives the tale its most enduring form. His verses linger on the workshop, the melting wax, the father's desperate instruction. Icarus, caught between earth and sky, is less a symbol of pride than of youthful longing and the cost of ignoring restraint. The wings, delicate and dangerous, become a test of obedience and ambition. Daedalus and Icarus are bound together not just by blood, but by the tension between invention and the limits set by gods and fate. The myth shifts from legend to caution, a shadow cast over every act of creation. In 1900, Arthur Evans arrived on Crete with a vision that would alter the world's understanding of ancient myth. His first days at Knossos were spent among the olive groves, scraping away earth until the sprawling outlines of a palace began to surface. What emerged was not a single building, but a tangle of rooms, stairways, and corridors so complex that Evans called it a labyrinth. The word, once confined to legend, now clung to the stones themselves. Evans did more than uncover ruins. He shaped what generations would believe they were seeing. Diaries and notebooks, now preserved in the Ashmolean Museum, reveal how each decision, where to reconstruct and what to leave as rubble, became a quiet act of storytelling. Concrete columns replaced vanished wood, and faded fragments of fresco were restored with bold, modern colors. The palace that visitors walk through today is as much a product of Evans's imagination as of Bronze Age hands. His restoration blurred the line between discovery and invention. Some archaeologists argued for restraint, wanting to leave the site as a ruin. Evans pressed on, convinced that only by rebuilding could he show the world what the labyrinth had once been. The archives hold evidence of these debates, letters, sketches, and plans that map the tension between preservation and creation. Knossos became famous not simply because it was old, but because it seemed to invite the eye to get lost. Its maze-like plan, amplified by Evans's choices, made the myth tangible. Yet every layer of concrete, every painted wall, asks a silent question. Did archaeology uncover the labyrinth, or did it help create a new one for the modern age? The scale of Knossos defies easy explanation. Covering nearly 20,000 square meters, the palace sprawls across the Cretan hilltop in a web of corridors, staircases, and chambers. Over 1,000 rooms have been identified by archaeologists, some vast and ceremonial, others no larger than a storeroom or niche. Layer upon layer of construction, rebuilding after fire and collapse, has produced a structure where orientation slips away. Visitors move through a maze of intersecting passageways, with light wells and staircases rising and dropping between levels. The central court anchors the complex, but from its edges, routes branch into administrative offices, shrines, and clusters of storage rooms. Each path is shaped to control movement, to guide or to bewilder. This was no accident of ancient builders. The palace's plan divides space into zones of power. Wide ramps and processional routes lead to the heart of authority. Secondary corridors split off toward private quarters or ritual spaces, while the slow, winding routes of the outer wings coil through workshops and storerooms. The very design enforces hierarchy. Access narrows as one moves deeper, with thresholds and blind turns marking boundaries between the public and the forbidden. Skilled laborers, including carpenters, painters, and metalworkers, operated within this hierarchy, their workshops embedded in the palace's fabric, their movement watched and regulated by the palace administration. Knossos was not simply a home for kings. It was a machine for organizing people, for channeling their actions and keeping secrets. In this environment, the idea of a labyrinth is not fantasy, but lived reality, a system that makes escape difficult, not just for monsters, but for anyone caught inside. Authority here is not a single face, but a structure that shapes every step, every decision. The palace itself becomes the true Minos, and the drama is not just about a maze, but about the struggle to break free from its grip. Captivity. In the palace was not a puzzle to be solved, but a trap that tightened with every passing day. Diodorus Siculus writes of Daedalus as a man pursued, his freedom threatened by a reward so substantial that even friends might turn informer. Minos' reach extended beyond the walls, making the sea as dangerous as the corridors of Knossos. Any hope of slipping away by boat was crushed. Every harbor was watched, every oar counted. The palace, with its 1,000 rooms and hidden stairways, became a prison as much as a marvel. Inside, Daedalus's skills lost their luster as tokens of royal favor and became tools for survival. The craftsmen who once shaped ceremonial spaces, now faced the relentless calculation of escape. The pressure was not just political, but personal. Icarus, still a boy, shared the cell and the fear. Their partnership was born not from legend, but from necessity. A father and son forced into alliance by the machinery of palace control. The reward for Daedalus's capture was no idle threat. It transformed every interaction into a risk, every whisper into a possible betrayal. In this climate, invention became a response to desperation. The walls that once echoed with the sounds of construction now pressed in, demanding a solution that no ordinary skill could provide. The story's emotional core takes shape here. Ingenuity is not a luxury, but the last refuge of those with nowhere left to run. The story of Daedalus and Icarus hinges on a question that refuses easy answers. Could wings of wax and feathers ever have left the ground, or is the myth built on the impossible? Ancient texts describe Daedalus at his bench, arranging feathers in careful rows and sealing them with beeswax, but the details read as much like a craftsman's manual as a poet's vision. Modern science has begun to lift the veil. Residue analysis of Minoan pottery has uncovered the unmistakable chemical fingerprints of beeswax. Long-chain alkanes, wax esters, and fatty acids embedded in the clay. These biomarkers, identified through gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, prove that Bronze Age Cretans handled beeswax as a real material, not just a symbol. In the same layers, faint traces of feather-derived lipids have been detected, suggesting that feathers and wax were processed side by side, perhaps for ritual, ornament, or even technical experiments lost to time. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to reconstruct the myth's most famous invention. Using raw honeycomb harvested from Cretan apiaries and feathers from local birds, they have followed the logic of the old stories. Melt the wax below 70 degrees Celsius, press the softened sheets around bundles of feathers, and bind them to light wooden frames. The results are fragile and temperamental. In dry air, the composite holds together, but the first touch of heat or moisture turns the wax soft and the structure unstable. Even at modest temperatures, the adhesive bond fails. Under stress, wind, movement, or the weight of a human limb, the wings threaten to tear apart. Glide tests, tethered and carefully monitored, reveal the limits. A brief, wavering lift, followed by collapse. The experiment exposes the myth's material core. Daedalus, in this reading, is not a magician, but a technician pressed to the edge of what is possible. Every choice, how much wax, what kind of feather, how to bind them, carries risk. The story's darkness lies not in the dream of flight, but in the knowledge that the tools at hand may never be enough. The myth of Icarus lingers across the map of the Aegean, not as a body, but as a name. The Icarian Sea, stretching between Samos and the Cyclades, claims its title from the place where the boy vanished. Icaria, the island caught in the same waters, stands as a permanent reminder, a geography shaped by memory and loss. Diodorus Siculus writes that these names mark the site of Icarus's descent, as if the sea itself holds the afterimage of flight and ruin. Yet the myth's shadow spreads further than coastlines. In Virgil's Aeneid, the labyrinth survives as more than a building. The poet sets its image on the golden doors of Apollo's temple at Cumae, a pattern of winding paths that no eye can follow to the end. For Virgil, The labyrinth becomes a symbol of every human journey through confusion and fate, a maze that stands for the choices and dangers of life itself. The myth slips from the hands of Daedalus and Icarus, entering the realm of allegory. Later, Greek and Roman artists fix Icarus in marble and mosaic, wings still outstretched or tumbling toward the waves. He becomes less a person than a gesture, arms raised, head tilted back, forever suspended between hope and disaster. Statues and frescoes render not a single moment, but the tension between ambition and collapse. In these images, Daedalus is rarely present. The father fades into the background, known only by what he built and what he lost. Material culture preserves the myth, but never settles its meaning. Each retelling, each artifact invites new questions. Is Icarus a warning, a dream, or the echo of a craftsman's grief? The story endures not by offering answers, but by refusing to be pinned down, its outline shifting with every generation that looks back toward the labyrinth and the sky. No single meaning settles over the myth of Daedalus and Icarus. Each generation of scholars and storytellers finds a different pattern in the labyrinth. The most persistent reading is one of technological hubris, a warning against the dangers of overreaching skill. Of its account lingers on the process, the careful layering of feathers, the melting of wax, the father's instructions to avoid both sun and sea. Here, flight becomes a metaphor for invention pushed too far, and Icarus's fall stands as the cost of ignoring limits. The details of the workshop are not just poetic, but precise, as if the myth itself wants to be taken as a manual of risk. But there is another current, quieter, but just as strong. The story can be read as a rite of passage, a journey from childhood to the edge of adulthood. Icarus, lifted by hope and longing, soars beyond his father's reach. The exhilaration and the fall are both part of the same arc, a brief shining moment that ends in loss. Ovid's language captures the boy's thrill as much as his doom. In this view, the wax and feathers are less about forbidden knowledge and more about the fragile hope of growing up. A third interpretation draws the myth into the realm of politics and power. Daedalus is not just an inventor, but a craftsman trapped by authority. The labyrinth is a system built to serve a king, and the wings are a desperate answer to life under surveillance. Diodorus Siculus writes of rewards for betrayal, of escape made impossible by the reach of Minos. The flight becomes an act of resistance, a craftsman's bid for freedom in a world ruled by force. None of these readings cancels the others. The myth holds them in tension, a warning, a coming of age, a parable about power. The labyrinth's paths do not lead to a single exit. Instead, they invite us to wander, to question, and to accept that some mysteries are meant to remain unresolved. Flight begins, not with celebration, but with necessity. Daedalus and Icarus, fugitives from stone corridors and silent threats, step out into the blinding air above the restless sea. Ovid lingers on the awkwardness of invention, wings that tremble, feathers stitched with hope and fear. The father's hands, rough from years of craft, steady the boy's shoulders. There is no crowd, no witness except the sky and the water below. The only sound is the wind, the beat of two hearts, and the faint creak of wax and wood. Icarus rises, drawn upward by the promise of freedom, the world below shrinking to a patchwork of memory, walls, guards, the endless maze. He laughs, the sound sharp and startling, carried away by the breeze. Daedalus calls after him, his voice cracked with warning, but the wind scatters his words. The sun climbs higher, indifferent and relentless. Heat seeps into the wax, softening the careful joints. Feathers loosen, one by one, drifting behind like lost days. Icarus, caught in the rush of ascent, chases the shimmer at the edge of the sky, his arms outstretched, his eyes fixed on the impossible. The sun does its work without malice. Wax melts, droplets falling unnoticed. The wings unravel, not with drama, but with a quiet that feels final. There is no thunder, no blaze of light, only a sudden emptiness, a body tumbling, limbs reaching for air, swallowed by blue. Daedalus, suspended between sky and sea, sees the space where his son had been. The water below, later named for Icarus, closes over the moment. In that instant, invention becomes loss. The father's skill, his answer to captivity, turns into the source of grief. No warning, no mastery, no desperate plea can reclaim what the sky has taken. The myth remains not because of the fall alone, but because it fuses exhilaration and sorrow, freedom and its cost. Every hope of escape, every leap toward the unknown carries the risk of ruin. What endures is not a lesson, but a wound. A father hovering above the water, arms outstretched, searching for a voice already lost to the waves. The story lingers there, in the silence after the fall, where invention, freedom, and limit meet and dissolve. Even now, the ruins of Knossos hold secrets, fragments of genius, ambition, and loss buried beneath centuries of dust. As we reconstruct the myth, it mirrors our own world. Invention still courts risk, and boundaries still provoke defiance. The line between freedom and downfall remains razor thin. Some labyrinths are escaped, others inherited. The story endures, asking, what price will we pay to break free? Share your thoughts below.